Howdy, hi, folks. Now then, this is going to be ENTP, but it's also the profile of Wilma at the bottom, who's an ENTP character. So, we just added this. So we're going to be describing slot 1 of ENTP, and it ticks 3 boxes. It's a valued function. It's a default function, meaning that it's an extroverting function in an extroverting type. And it's also a club function. It's an NT function. So first of all, a key concept to understand is what is extroverting, what is introverting, what is a default mode of operation, modus operandi, and a situational modus operandi. So an extrovert, well, Carl Jung actually said an extrovert doesn't exist, but it's somebody who has a preference for extroversion. I call it extroverting because it is a verb, and this explains that. I'm going to read through much of this. I'll read through the key points. Right then. Yeah, default mode is extroverting, i.e. empiricalizing and externalizing. Yeah, then you have the externospection. So I'm going to do it like this, and I'm going to go over this information here. And I actually give the example of ENTP in this. This is in case you're on a small device. I'll read this through. For extroverting types, the default operating mode is, you guessed it, extroverting. This means the type defaults to extroverting, i.e. directing attention outwards towards action in the world and empirical data, such as immediate sensory instinctual data, so that would be SE, social customs, morality, body language, especially facial expressions and tone of voice, signifying feelings, or facts, numbers, practical application, TE. The world as possibilities, so this is for ENTP, connections between ideas and situations that can be articulated, debated, NE, because there. With NI, you end up getting with, well, I just think it's, you know what I mean? Like, NE is debatable, so it's going off something with NE. So I could maybe give the example of Douglas Adams. He's writing the first episode of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He's created this huge jeopardy for Arthur and Thord. They've just been thrown out into cosmic space, and he's made this big deal of the fact that, and his premise is they're going to die within 30 seconds unless they're rescued. Problem he had was every solution he came up with to how they got rescued had the problem of being highly improbable, and he can't solve the problem. And then he happens to be watching a television program on judo. This is an example of how NE and TI work together. He's watching a television program on judo, and the instructor says, what you've got to do is you've got to use the weight of your opponent against himself. And Douglas Adams, that, he goes, ooh, there's something interesting here. So I think that's the NE. When it's like he intuited, ooh, that's an interesting idea. And he was able to extract, and this is where we're then going from NE into TI in a sort of a combination. And he was able to extract the sort of the essential lesson from use your weight of your opponent against himself to extract that weight of the opponent against himself to weight of the problem against itself. And he thought, what problem do I have? What is the weight of the problem that I have to use against itself? improbability. And then that led to the infinite improbability drive, where because it was highly unlikely that Arthur and Ford would be rescued, they were rescued by a cosmic craft with an infinite improbability drive by Ford's semi-cousin and a woman that Arthur failed terribly to get off with at a party in Islington. So there we go. That is an example of any in a rational, an ENTP. Like most people who know Douglas Adams and typology will type him as ENTP. I think it was also an Enneagram 7. We'll get into that later. So that was, it's sort of there. We can go through it all and discuss it. With NI, no, someone has a sense of direction and that, and it's like it's NI is only really discussable by leading maybe to the steps that can then be discussed, but it's still more about an internal strategic vision of how things will develop. One of the main sort of way that NI can be seen. I'm going to read this bit about instinctor, about sensory instinctual data. Disgust, sexual attraction, excitement, fear of spider, snake, etc. show that the sensory is bound up with the emotional reactions and and then an impulse to habit, SI, or impactful action, SE. So for example, Keirsey's artisans, like SE Wheelhouse, so like the top two, they seek stimulation and audacious and adaptable. That's more than just sensory acuity, which is what you would get if you were defining SE with two ideas. Oh, I know what sensing is, and I know what extroverting is. Then you would get towards empirical sensor, but it's more than that. So there's this other factor, this temperament factor. Again, the limbic system, it reacts to sensory input before it gets to the neocortices. It's plural because this is one cortex, under the skull, and then there's another one over there. And then they're connected by the corpus callosum, which is there's more connection between the hemispheres in women than men. Right. And then what extroversion there? A manifest movement of interest. And it's important there about active and passive. The extrovert uses extroversion more actively than the introvert. With the introvert tends to be more distracted or their attention is grabbed from the introvert. Their preference is to introvert. Depends on the situation though. Right, then we've got the situational row. And in this, I'm going to give examples. And I actually mentioned Wilma in this. So this is examples when the ENTP will introvert. Now, in the case of usually ENTP, it's TI, but sometimes you can get TEUs with TI. So I'm just going to read through this, and I'm just going to put myself off screen a bit so you can see more. So, introverting, subjectifying, internalizing. Right, compared to the personal, if you're familiar with Model G, this is just a comparison. Compared to the personal row in Victor Galenka's Model G, the situational row is less specific. It can include the personal. Here we go with Wilma. E.g., the NETX resemble Wilma Twindley in my stage play Wilma and Rena on lulu.com, and it's linked in the description. Free, the first act is free. You just go to the flow page, and then it's one of the options to download the PDF of it. She's introverting as she prays and reflects in soliloquy, but that's beside the point. And it is while she reflects that she accesses her weakest function, FI. However, the situational includes something the personal does not. The idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, Jungian cognitive functions, which are of opposite Wertung to the type, e.g. situations which draw on the introverting functions of the extrovert, such as when the extrovert pauses to ponder, Ti, consider how something might develop or have a moment of inspiration from within, Ni, run a present experience against their storehouse of past experiences, Si, as a way to interpret it, or pause to search their own feelings, such as judging what move to make in the romantic sphere, or in dilemma where different values are at loggerheads, e.g. selling out versus artistic integrity, and this is assessed by the person as what feels right to it personally, Fi. And then wrinkle about CBT. Jung on introverting. I've added some clarification to this, and because it is quite hard to understand without the bit that I've added. Because he then talks about unable to restore the interest again, and he talks about libido. And what I do is I convert the word libido into interest. And I read it at the start of Jung's book on the unconscious. And basically, interest is correlated to libido. It's the way it's expressed. So, because Jung criticized Freud for having libido just as sexual interest. But it's any kind of, it's like interest is the correlate of libido and is easier to understand. Interest does not move towards the object. I would say it's stimulus, because whereas if you're listening to a very stimulating podcast, there is no object. It's sound. Like I said, the vibration of molecules, and then it vibrates the air, but you know what I mean? There's no sort of like physical object. Interest does not move towards the object, but recedes towards the subject. So interest does not move towards the stimulus, but recedes towards the subjective interpretation of said stimulus. So it's more on the interpretation than on the stimulus itself. Introverting, i.e. the state of introversion, means the subject person has more interest in its own subjective experience than in the object or external stimulus. E.g., sound is not an object, but it can hold one's attention outside of oneself. Everyone whose attitude is introverted thinks, feels, and acts in a way that clearly demonstrates that the subject is the chief factor of motivation, while the object or stimulus such as sound, most of things are second. Now the corollary of that would be if everyone who is introverted by default thinks, feels, and acts in a way that shows that, then everyone who is extroverted shows that the way they think, feels, and acts is that. So this is where you get this overall preference in ENTP for all of the extroverting functions. And so it's a default function. Now, it's also, I'm going to show these little bits for later on. So like you got your wheelhouse functions there, and that is one of the club functions. There, I'm going to, if you want to, I'm going to show these on screen, and so I suggest you pause it to read it through. So, and pause. And pause and get your magnifying glasses out. Counter club when I get to that later. And pause. That you'll be able to see. This I might need to go in. And pause. This one again. And pause. Right, so now let's get back on track. So we're talking about so we've got NE. So we now know it's a default function. We also know it's the lead function. So it's a default function and it's valued. ENTPs like to do any stuff. In fact, they like to do any stuff more than TE stuff and FE stuff and SE stuff. Although frequently a lot of NE stuff involves SE stuff. In that if possibilities are being actively searched for in the world, some sort of SE will come up in that. So these sort of functions working together. The ENTP being, on average, the best debater. So there'd be a bit of a conflict there, a bit of SE, a bit of FE involved in there. Right, so and then NE being used, now it's also in the NTP, so it's used within the context also of it being an NT function. So it is used in combination with the TE, the TI, and the NI. And I'll get on to how NI works later on. But the intellect of ENTP, you got this intellect here, this strategic building intellect. And ENTP overall is an informing type. So it goes towards what is known as reactive inquiry rather than proactive enterprise. Although it can do that because a rational type, an NT, is good at all of these roles. But the role of modeler, which is basically inventor, the creator, is basically a theory that is implemented a bit more than INTP can implement it. So this is where you get Keirsey would say that ENTPs make the best inventors on average. There's a bit more to extrovert their feeling than the INTP. So this is a key distinction in Keirsey that very few people make. And because people don't make this distinction, people think that Keirsey talks in stereotypes. What Keirsey had was a system of psychology and a corresponding system of sociological intellects, socially useful, intelligent actions. So the reason why ENTP is best at enacting the role of the modeler, of the inventor, is that the role of the inventor is a strategic intellect role, and it's expressive, and it is informing. Now, on the other side of the equation, ENTP is a rational, an NT, and their top intellect is strategic builder, and they are an expressive type, and they're informing. So the expressive and informing type, the collaborator, fits the collaborative role of modeler. So they don't have to stretch to enact that role. They would have to then, to be designer, they would only have to stretch in terms of going more reserved to enact the reserved role. Now, then after that, theoretically, it would be the mobilizer. So you kind of get ENTP sort of like leaders of a business. It's just that they then have to learn to be more directive. So maybe the 7-wing 8, that 8-wing. It's still expressive. They just have to flex from informing to directive. And also it draws more on these functions, TE and NI, which are unvalued functions. And contending arranger. So this is more of a role better suited towards INTJ. And for the ENTP to enact that role, it has to go this particular role of arranging contingencies, of planning where things can go wrong. So usually ENTPs are positive, and so it's like, well, if A goes wrong, we then do B, and if B goes wrong, we then do C. And it's quite a reserved role, someone working on its own. And so intellectually ENTP can do it, but it's a reserved role and a directive role. So it's a bit of a stretch for ENTP. But intellectually they can do it. There's not much energy there for it. So their preference is for expressing their sort of creativity within the realm of NT areas, which stereotypically go towards the STEM fields, but they can also go towards comedy, and in Peter Schiff's case, economics. Now here's somebody, Peter Schiff. He's an ENTP who enacts this role of mobilizer because he is a CEO of his business, but he loves to debate, Peter Schiff. And the ENTPs also make good lawyers as well, good barristers, someone in the court. So in England, the barrister is the lawyer that's actually in court. Right then, so let's say what I've got here about subfunctions. I'm actually back in communication with Selena, so I'll be learning some more from her. She has a good knowledge of Van Franz and Van der Hoop. In Selena's opinion, which I agree with, NE is more than just pattern recognition. So this is on Personality Hacker for dumbing down their definitions. Right, for instance, they'll call NI perspectives. I mean, what a load of nonsense. I mean, NJ is like they have one perspective, right? Perspectives is NE because we're informing. It's like we could look at it like this, you could look at it like that. What about in the fact who's probably the best type at perspectives? ENTP. The ENTP that prides itself on one night it can win the argument from one side and then win the argument from the other side, take a different perspective, look at it like this, look at it like that. Whereas NI is more associated with seeing one sort of singular vision, one perspective, and getting trapped into that tunnel thinking. So integration of perspectives, I'd say that's more NE. So they just want something quick in Personality Hacker. The only thing, one of the few things they've got going for them is the fact they've got a car model which is so sort of like metaphorical that no one's going to take it seriously, which is a good thing. Not actually mistake the model for the reality. So it's more than just because it does something once the pattern has been recognized, and this gets towards sort of assertive NE. Possibilities to explore, actively exploring possibilities. Okay, NE and SE can both seem opportunistic. SE will take advantage of opportunities concretely, whereas NE will take advantage of possibilities. It's a little bit more abstract, but to the ENTP, it's like obviously there, but it's not concretely there. It's just like one or two steps there. So an example, Peter Schiff, he has this grand strategic thinking. He understands fundamentals economically. So he would say, right, so he knew with the housing market. And so in 2008, he shorted the subprime market because he knew it would collapse. And he knew there wasn't much danger of it sort of going the other way and the shorts being like forced to cover. So, right. So, and he has prepared himself for what's going to happen economically. So this is an interesting example is that he's also probably got a 1 in his trifix as well. I think he's 713 like Wilma. Wilma was a character who's obsessed with Peter Schiff. Right. Yeah, because I already knew a lot about what he's said since 2009, so I'll sort of work it into the character. Right. We've got actively exploring possibilities. Yes, actively exploring possibilities. So assertive. And then the transcontextual thinking, that's what I said there about Douglas Adams with how he came up with the infinite and probability drive. And then here, looking at things from different points of view. That would be intuition of perspectives. From your perspective, it's like, that would be NE. Like I said, NI can get trapped in a vision. Directive. That's why INFP makes good mediator. Again, like, you got to see difference in different perspectives to be a good debater. Right. So let's see what we've got for Wilma here. And I'll see what's relevant to ENTP and sort of what is specific to Wilma. So Seeing the world as possibilities, that's all ENTP is. Good at making connections, reading patterns in non-psychological data, creative, inventive, and original. Easily distracted, she is attracted to new ideas like a moth to a flame. Right, so that, and then that bit, the final two is specific to Wilma and probably Peter Schiff. Steadfast in economic and political beliefs. She sometimes overgeneralizes by ignoring exceptions. So that it's a little bit of a cliche that ENTPs don't have a sort of moral conviction. Like Peter Schiff definitely has a moral conviction based around libertarianism and reason. But somebody like Mark Linsenmayer, doing my American philosopher's voice, on the Partially Examined Life podcast, he would have a sort of like take lots of different sort of like ethical systems, ethical and moral systems, and like for him, there's no particular right approach in the system. So he's like almost amoral, not immoral, amoral. So whereas with Peter Schiff, with a particular libertarian point of view, of course, I don't think it helped the fact that his dad was a political prisoner because he was a tax protester. That's Erwin Schiff. Right. So, and of course, NE frequently bound up with TI and TE in ENTP. When the ENTP is actively pursuing a practical idea, they're going to be using the TE with it. And then usually it's bound up with the TI. You've got that axis towards NE, which usually correlates to constructing, strategic construction. So you've got ENTPs creating a theory. So you've got Alshra, the founder of Socionics, created Model A. Also, John Beebe is sort of categorized as ENTP. Right, 27 minutes on the first flipping function. Right. So, and again, this ticks two boxes. It's an NT function. Because you got a preference for intuiting and thinking. It's an NT function, and it's a valued function, but it's not a default function. So, let's have a look at the subfunctions. Again, they're integration theories. That's something else. Again, perspectives. Yeah, but see, maybe it's the things with perspectives. Like nearly every function could have perspective, an insight. Some people might say that, oh, NI is insight. Right. But you could have an ESFJ be insightful with FE. FE insights. Nuances. Right. So, again, you can read that. Again, the subjective premises. I'll read some of the Wilma stuff. So this is what I'll say is like typical and not typical of ENTPs. Very good at reasoning, mental level IQ, especially. Well, nearly all ENTPs are going to have an IQ like a logical and mathematical. It's going to be well above average. It's going to be well above average because it's going to get trained up. Yeah, quickly notices errors in others' reasoning, such as errors of cause and effect. Yeah, pretty much all ENTPs that line. Errors in reasoning. Because, again, they're very good debaters. Again, practice. She has contempt for the reasoning of specific to Wilma and Peter Schiff. Gets worked up about that because such votes are allowed to vote. Thus, their different way of thinking as Wilma had consequences on election results. Yeah. Wilma and Peter Schiff. She's not just Peter Schiff in a dress. Although, when she said that, someone said that to her. She said, intellectually, thank you. Aesthetically, how dare you? Yeah. I don't know how I'm going to work that in. And then that's something from the bit that's highlighted in red is from the stage play. It's not going to be in the sitcom because I sort of had to change something. TE. So the TE is slot 3, two things going for it, two aspects going for it. It's a default function, it's an extroverting function, and it's an NT function, but it's not valued. So T is used as a means to an end. T is used for any. It's sort of used on the fly, not for its own sake. So, right. So typically, okay, if we have the sort of the ENTP at its best, well, I mean, there could be like someone like Feynman. I mean, he was in an area that was not like inventing actual inventions. But although he did work on the Manhattan Project, so he was going towards some kind of implementation there. Maybe via sort of like not very sort of like stages in between you get towards the end. I don't know his role on the Manhattan Project. I know that he got bored and he broke into lockers. Right. Because he worked out a way to break the combinations. Was he a safe cracker? He learnt that. Anyhow, boredom, Enneagram 7. So maybe that him using sort of TE there. Anyway, so yeah, fish is water. So the ENTP fish does not know it's wet with TE. Fish doesn't know it's wet. Modest servant is used to serve the needs of the dominant function. So again, so inventing. So the ENTP will have an idea. So again, this is in this role. So this is stereotypically in their like idealized role. If the ENTP is inventing, well, and they have an idea, well, they need to make that idea in the real world. They have to extrovert that idea. They have to get the practical thinking involved. They have to get the right parts, all of that for a prototype. So the role of inventor is drawing on these three functions, NE, TI, and TE. Where you've got NE and TI would be maybe sort of the configuration in the mind, the idea and working out the configuration in the mind, and then with the TE, the practical application in the real world. Can you get the parts? Can you actually make it? Will it work? Or is it an invention which is beyond the state of the art? Are there materials around that could be used, for example? So, for example, I think people might have come up with the wing for an aircraft, and it's like, but so there might have been some, because the limiting factor with the aircraft, say with the Wright brothers, was actually like their aircraft wasn't that good. It's like, because people tried various aircraft, powered like fixed wing, but they didn't have an engine strong enough. So people could come up with the invention of the aeroplane. They had the wing. We studied how bird wings worked and that, and probably knew the mathematics of airflow over the wing. But what they were struggling to create was an engine powerful enough to achieve enough forward speed in order to get the lift effect under the wings by the air going over the top of the wing faster than below, and therefore the pressure is left and less on the top, and then you get it pushed up. Right. TA stuff. Did I add some stuff to this? Oh, I didn't add all the new stuff to this. I'm going to get the latest one for NE, for T, and I'm going to show it on screen. I'm just going to split this. Whiteboards on own. Slide elements. I just need to put TE in because I did a new TE. Link here. Right. New TE. Is that there? That's it. The new and improved. Where am I? Where's it gone? No, it's that one. The new and improved TE. New and improved. I'll go like this. New and improved. So, yeah, and actually, know an ESTJ resembler who's working on creating the procedures in a business. So ESTJs can be creative. So you've got there. Forming a company's processes. And another instance of venture capital. Yeah, forming a company's processes. So you can have an ESTJ go in, say a business that's launching, and this is the example that I got from the person that told me. And she's involved in these businesses and checking their procedures and then coming up with new procedures for the business. So I mean, I would say, so you're creating something new there. It's not just enforcing the standard operating procedure, but she's probably taking all of the learning and experience that she has and applying that and tweaking that to the circumstances. So you're using TE creatively. Now, I'd imagine that this particular kind of TE, this creative TE, is going to get drawn on a lot by ENTP. With that NE, I think the NE will draw a lot on that creative subfunction of TE, the creative subfunction. Yeah. Right. This more assertive kind of TE will be drawn on more by ESTJ and ENTJ because they're more of an assertive type. Right then. The EPs will generally draw on, well, ESTP will draw more on assertive, but the EPs that are ENTP, ENFP, and ESFP will go a bit more towards the creative subfunction of TE. But it also depends on what they're doing. Right, so on TI. No, we're not. Are we on TE? Yeah, we're on TE. Right. Oops. All right, reconfigure this. There we are. So, examples for the Wilma. When necessary, she's good at implementing her knowledge. So then there's that TE there. As a child and teenager, she coded and built robots. Again, that's not every ENTP. However, the lack of discipline meant those robots were nothing special. So this is a problem for ENTP. It's that it's potentially they have very good TE, but it's this lack of discipline. Because usually TE requires discipline. I mean, our TJ is not disciplined. She moving quickly onto other projects with the NE. An idea for this, an idea for that. Gotta learn to write those ideas down and like process it out. Not quickly get bored. EPs quickly get bored. And again, EP is usually Enneagram 7 fixated. Not all of them, but when you got an EP and the Enneagram 7, quickly bored. It's a low threshold. And a high threshold to get interest. Quickly move on to an autodidact. Decided not to go to again, that's changed for Wilma's housemates. Had to get her to England. There had to be a reason for that. Right, 38 minutes. I'm going to get a wriggle on. Right. NI. Right, backseat driver. Backseat driver. If I do the Wilma thing first and then I go to the subfunctions. But I'll say, okay, so backseat driver is this idea of ENTP has this sort of information, part of the ENTP. So we use the metaphor of parts. So the preference of ENTP is to explore lots of options. That is the P preference in MBTI. And move on to the new and novel options. So it's like a lot of exploration of ideas, generation of ideas and exploration of ideas. The NI is sort of information for, oh, this is a plan. NI in the NT temperament is an idea of this is a strategic path to going and how things will develop. Now, this NI in that context, an example of someone with very strong NI for an ENTP is Peter Schiff, where he has been able to apply his knowledge of Austrian school economics and the fact that he's got knowledge from being a stockbroker for decades and he's able to plan decades in advance. And now it's happening with all of the inflation. And so he can see how it all plans out. And so he talks about, why can't other people join together these rather obvious dots? That's the phrase he uses, rather obvious dots. Got to be able to join the dots together. So, for example, when you've got a huge amount, you can't have normal interest rates when you've got an abnormal amount of debt, because all that debt is adjustable. And so if interest rates just go up a tiny bit, a lot of people and governments are going to have problems servicing that debt. Therefore, interest rates will not go up to fight inflation, because there'll be a debt crisis. So if you know that inflation is already 15% using shadow stats, which uses the CPI from 1980, that is less doctored because it doesn't have hedonic adjustments in it, it doesn't have substitutions in it, and doesn't have owner's equivalent rent in it. I know the TE, I've listened to Peter Schiff. So again, going through all the steps. So Peter Schiff knows that in the United States, they cannot fight inflation because they cannot raise interest rates high enough to kill inflation without killing the bubble economy first, because there is too much debt. So, because he knows that politicians will always kick the can down the road, what this means is they're going to talk about fighting inflation, but they're never going to fight inflation. They're going to keep the bubble going. So Peter Schiff's bet is that the United States government and the Federal Reserve really is part of the government, because they're supposed to be independent, but Congress, the president nominates and Congress confirms the head of the Federal Reserve. So it's a political appointment. So all of these problems with the Federal Reserve, so Peter Schiff can see it. It's like he knows what's going to happen. He knows that politicians are all short-termism and they haven't got the courage. They're not going to fight inflation. They're not going to collapse the whole economy just to kill inflation. So he knows. So given that they're not going to fight inflation, he's thinking, well, you need to invest in this, and this. Foreign stocks that pay dividends and all of this in real companies that have pricing power, meaning that they sell products or commodities that people always need. And in a high inflationary environment, you still need food. So it's good to sell food. Whereas discretionary products, people don't need. But people are always going to need toilet rolls. So in a high inflationary environment, Walmart's still going to have pricing power, because there's still going to be people that need the necessities. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. The point is that there's an example of NI in Peter Schiff where he can join the dots together of what's going to happen. But it's NI usage within the context of the NT intellect and within the context of his specific discipline, which is economics and finance. But for most of the NTPs, it's like a voice in the back of my head. It's like they can see how something's developed and that's the plan, but they usually want to switch the plan and go on to something more interesting. So this is why in Socionics Model A, it's called the ignoring function, the ignoring position. And again, in the metaphor of the backseat driver, you've got this voice, this part of you that's saying, no, you got to do this, you got to stay on track. It's like this. And in the end, it's like, shut up, you're boring. That's boring. I want to do this other thing. And so it's integrating the NI it will correlate with the ENTP being more goal-directed and better at project completion. That long-range strategic thinking. So what NTJs are good at, NI with TE. So the advice for ENTPs is to get better at NI with TE, which on a socially intelligent role looks like coordinating resources towards a long-term strategic objective. So if you think about project management, so if you've got that ENTP inventor and they create the product, and then again towards the business side, and then it's like, well, I've got to get all of these steps right towards this long-term goal, and then have the product. So the role in there is you're drawing on this intuition of time part of NI and this practical thinking, TE. Get the sequence of steps correct, in the real world in order to achieve this long-term objective. That correlates to NI with TE. So again, unsung allies. Unsung allies. And I, as an INTP resembler, need to get better at TE and NI too. I'm doing a lot of long-term planning with the sitcom. I call it a sitcom, it's not really a sitcom. It's a sci-fi-ish, dramatic-ish comedy. Right. So, what are we on now? Right then, did the NI, got the bits there. Again, opposite of stabilizing. Yes, opposite of stabilizing. Guardians have the point of view of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. NI, it's about developing. Developing is the opposite of stabilizing. So, ESTJ and ESFJ, NI polar. Just want to keep with the plan. We might then think, oh, all right, well, why aren't SI DOMs more like that? Oh, well. Again, I think that is a part of it. There's a part of them, especially those NI DOMs, especially INFJ. Yeah, well, I said it. Right. Right. Let's see something about Wilma. Let's see a comment on this. She can see future events and plan accordingly if they're important enough, such as her movie ambitions. Usually, her less important future plans are undercut by her in-the-moment distractibility by new, interesting ideas and possibilities. There you go, with the ENTP. Usually, her less important future plans are undercut by her in-the-moment distractibility by new, interesting ideas and possibilities. So that sentence is about any trumping NI in many cases in the ENTP. Right then. Next one. We're now moving into the counter club, the counter nucleus. So this comes from Vanderhoop. Oh, by the way, NI. I'm going to remove myself. If you pause that, these are Vanderhoop's 6 features of Intuiting. This is from his book, Conscious Orientation, which was published in German, even though it was Dutch. Probably more readers in German. Well, certainly were. 1937, translated into English by Laura Wasn't Chained to a Kitchen Sink Hutton in 1939. Now, on the subjects of that, probably these good jobs for women were sort of like restricted to those of sort of a higher social class because of sort of the way opportunities worked in those days. That's my sort of thinking on it. Right, so Vanderhoop's model. Let's go with this one. Oh, right, okay. First of all, ENTPs. This idea that for the extrovert, the focus of attention is on the world rather than yourself in the world, or the subjective experience of oneself in the world. Whereas for the introvert, it's for myself in the world. But the interesting thing that he's done is added this idea that the introvert has more access to the unknown self, whereas it's a wall for the extrovert, the unknown self. But the world is a wall. The unknown world is walled off for the introvert. But there is some penetrability of the unknown world for the extrovert. So this was an interesting idea. Might not be true, but it's interesting, and interesting to compare to the boundaries model of Annie Linden. Again, contextual boundaries, self, other, if you want to think about that. Right, and then if you quickly want to pause that, again, Vanderhoop, sphere of interest, and you got their inspiration. It's a quick tag for any. World as possibilities. I mean, come on. I mean, has the definition of any changed much? I mean, it's pretty much how Socionics defines it. World as possibilities. Right. Water control by systematization. Yeah, that's TI in INTP. Vanderhoop was INTP, but he described himself as an introverted thinking type with subsidiary thinking. Via translation. Water's obligation, yeah, FE, water right behavior. Of course, we can have right. And again, clubs. So, I think what he's done here, you've got the intuition, you've got the N functions with the T functions, NT. So, logos, I think that correlates to NT. Because then you've got ST with technique. And you've got morality, SF. And then ethos, well, they see themselves as ethical NFs. So what does that mean? It means that Van der Hoop came up with the clubs before Myers-Briggs. And I know that they've read this book because they quote the flipping thing in their book, or in Isabel's book, Gifts Different, 10 times in Gifts Different, but hardly anyone talks about this book on YouTube. Even though, so what about all those people who read Gifts Different but never bothered to get the book? Now, maybe it was out of print and hard to get hold of. I mean, I've got an ex-library version. So, anyway, so this is ENFP, but the idea is, right, in order to get this right for like ENTP, you have to move all of that over there mentally. And so then it would be like the big sausage would be there, sort of like NE, NIT, and TI. And then this counter nucleus would be over here. So it would be a bit like this. But this is for INTP. So for ENTP, imagine that's bigger and that's bigger and that's smaller, that's smaller. And then you've got an SF counter nucleus. But I call it the counter club, just to make it easy and build on ideas. And so, right then, let's go to, right, I did the clubs, and now we're going to get back to this. All right. This is the B side of the personality, the inner ISFJ in ENTP. And ENTPs would do well to get hooked up with an ISFJ. Now, this is for the British people and people around the world. Boris Johnson, perhaps we should have a campaign. Send a comb in to number 10. He needs a comb. And it would be funny if he had like thousands of combs come in. And he needs an ISFJ to take care of him and certainly comb his hair. Right, I know he's married at the moment, but, you know, I'm not so sure she's ISFJ if he's got his hair like that. All right. So, yeah, ENTPs do well with an ISFJ, sort of complementary opposites rather than conflicting opposites, which would be ENTP and ISFP. Right. Right, yeah. Dabbling tertiary. Yeah, ENTP tends to use this dabbling. Whilst I talk about that, I'm just going to put it on screen. Again, you can see that there about the dabbling. I'll put it there. But ENTP, so there's a certain ENTP socionist out there, first name Jack. And so he did Actem at university. That wasn't his main course. His main course was philosophy. And sort of like, and I suppose he did more than dabbling in it, but it's not like his main focus of interest. But I think it's going to be difficult for ENTP to be a really good show player. I think it's more likely for ESTP, maybe someone like Russell Crowe, ESTP, but ENTP is going to be difficult. I mean, someone like Peter Cook, he wasn't a very good actor. He was very good at playing sketch characters, but the ability to sort of channel feeling and use FI is going to be limited. I think maybe ESTP can get away with it by sort of like using more of the emotional part of SE. But anyway, this idea of short-lived, so typically ENTP is using FE to perform. So think of it, ENTP comedians holding the attention, debating. Richard Feynman would probably use FE, but it's like FE combined with NE. So in debate for effect, and especially with the comedian, you've got the NE. Although you can have like comedy from other functions, there's a particular kind of comedy with NE. So someone like Peter Cook, maybe also John Cleese, NTP. I mean, he has said some FI polar stuff. I'm making fine TI distinctions between, say, like, no, that's not racist, that's culturalist. And it's like, okay, that's an interesting distinction there, John, but these days people don't really distinguish between race and culture. And so they don't realize that they're actually being racist by not making that distinction. Because they assume that someone of a specific race has a specific culture and that the culture is related to the race. No, it's not. Culture is not genetically determined. Anyhow, so he would make distinctions between, say, no, I'm criticizing the culture, I'm not criticizing the race. But it's like, yes, but you're doing it in a sort of an FI polar way, John. And so it's like dabbling. You can see there the dabbling FE of, I suppose it tends to be used negatively as well, the FE and for dramatic effect. This idea that there's also this idea that they're stimulated by people getting angry in a debate. Well, I can see them, they like to know that they're winning the debate, but generally with the quadra values of ENTP, which is so it's ENTPs and SFJs, value in the FE, they want a happy atmosphere around them, the ENTPs. And so they are sort of like motivated and launched by the FE. But again, it's dabbling. It's not the main thing. It's a counter club function. It's not an NT function. Right. So, and again, attracted towards FE, more attracted towards SI. Right. You see that there with the FE. Right. Awareness of group reality, they are. Right. They want the group harmony, focus on others, yeah. To an extent. To an extent, they want a happy atmosphere around them. Like it goes with the collaborative interaction style. So we've got Wilma on here. Let's see what we have for Wilma and what's specific to her and what's true of most ENTPs. So we have, in the past, she's been a bit of a debate troll online and in real life. There's a tendency for ENTPs. On subjects where she didn't have a firm opinion, she would frequently play devil's advocate. She can be charismatic when she put her mind to it, but can find this draining. She likes to be, too many O's there, likes to be in a happy atmosphere with her, it was done on a typewriter, with her acquaintances, so she usually doesn't rock the boat, as that can ruin the atmosphere. She is sensitive somewhat to the outward emotional expression of those she interacts with. However, that depends on whether she is concentrating rather than getting carried away by another thought idea which has popped into her head. So then she's not, you see what I mean, like NEing rather than concentrating on someone's affect display. Right. Right. And in principle, Lauren, who will be playing Wilma, has agreed to do a video with me where she will be going through this in character as Wilma and saying, Ben, why have you written a profile on me? But that's going to be down the road. Right. SI. Okay. Subjective instinctor. Right. If you please, pause that and then read it. Now, I will say for ENTP, what they're sort of like looking for is help with comfort sensor, with logistics. So if ISFJ can do the logistics for them, they'll be very happy. Very happy. So and again, it's what they're again. This is the B side, the inner ISFJ, the suggestible inferior. That again, sociologists would say suggestive, but no, suggestible. Right, and I'm just going to change this so you can see the slots down here. So I should have mentioned the slots before. Yes, that ticks 2 boxes, and that only ticks 1. But that's probably the most important box, is club, then valued, then default. That would be the implication from this arrangement, in that the first cut is club versus counter club. So all the club functions are on the left. And then within that, the 2 strongest ones in my model are the valued ones, and then it's default. So you see here, these both tick 2 boxes, but auxiliary is ahead of slot 3, which is Fisher's Water. And here, you've got slot 6 ahead of slot 7. Again, valued versus default. And here, again, 1 box. Slot 4 is ahead of slot 5. Now, sometimes in Dario's data, people will tick activities related to this function ahead of that, but people tend to overrate their tertiary function. So, again, suggestible. That means they appreciate help in SI areas. And it goes with the Romance style from Victor Golenko and Socionics of the infantile, which has got reframed to childlike. I don't know what the next one will be, but hopefully it's an improvement. They can't be bothered. They can't be done with all the mundane logistical details. Right, so let's see here what we've got for Wilma. Again, Boris Johnson. I need someone to comb his hair and dress him. She is not good at attending to her bodily needs and doing housework. She would like her potential romantic partner to handle the cooking and cleaning stuff. That's the big turn on for her. However, she also seeks a mind mate interested in the same abstract matters as she. Mind mate is an idea which comes from Keirsey. It's hard for her to find a philosopher who will also do her housework and wait on her. That's what she wants. Next one. Now we're going to go to the unvalued counter club functions. Right, and there's something here about the contrarian alternative, that it provides a balance against excesses of the lead function. So I think I'll put that down there. Provides balance. Right. Most of this function can be seen. But that counter can sometimes be a useful counterpoint to the excesses of the lead function. Yeah. So, that one actually. SE. Right. So, ENTPs do get themselves in situations where they're using SE. If they end up debating somebody too well, and like they might get into some physical conflict. You know, they debated too well. Oh yes, look, I've put this up here. So, like some examples of if we think about ENTP enacting some of these roles which require SE. So the promoter. Yeah, you could do ENTP going out there and BSM and promoting a scheme. You know, selling something that's not true or a theory that's not true. Cough model beeb, or you know, arguably some theories in socionics and talking about, oh, this is really, really true. And then later on, it just speaks for itself. It comes from reason. It's like, doesn't need to be empirically tested. It's metaphysical. Science. Go through that door. You're not needed. This is true. And then later on, oh, it's just a theory. So they can sell it. They can promote. They're FI powder. They don't care. A lot of times. But, you know, ENTPs can. But Peter Schiff's not like that. Because for him, he has the FE belief that what's best for business is to tell the truth. Because he thinks your reputation is so important. That might come from his one fix. Crafting. Yeah, crafting. ENTP inventor. Performer. Yeah, ENTPs can be good comedians and they can play good character comedy and good sketch characters, but they're not very good at getting down and dirty in the FI feelings of like giving a great sort of performance from the inside out, dealing with imaginative FI. Again, accommodating composer. Maybe probably sort of more witty kind of songs rather than like ISFP stuff like Pat Patterson. Because he does seem any polar Pat Patterson, but in a good way, because it means all the song is integrated and it's all prosody. All the elements are going towards the same goal. So it's like mood of the song with rhyme types and instability. Basically, you've got an unstable feeling in a song, you have unstable rhyme types. There's a spectrum of rhyme types from perfect family rhymes, which is within the same phonetic group, additive, subtractive, assonance rhymes, which have the same core vowel, but the consonant afterwards is different, and then a consonance rhyme where the vowel is different, but the consonant is the same. So want and won't, it would be a consonance rhyme, I think, because you've got the off versus the O and the long O. But the long O is a diphthong because it's anyway. I'm getting distracted. I'm any young. Right. So, but again, extroverted, they are able to, in certain situations, that pay attention because they are extroverts. So better at paying attention than, say, INTP. Again, stimulation, attention, immersion in the present context. Adaptation to circumstances, yeah, I think they can do that. So I think they can do this, but force and so it's not as much. But they're definitely better at this than INTP. Because just through their extroverting, they are going to come up, the situations that they come across are going to draw on some SE, but it's not valued. You're not going to get many ENTP cage fighters. They'll be underrepresented. And then Wilma, let's see what we got for Wilma with SE. She is adaptable. Ooh. She is adaptable, but can fail to concentrate on immersing herself in the present context. She can thus lack situational awareness. She can succeed in real-life practical tasks due to her technical wit. As previously mentioned, she is good at standing up for herself, so assertive SE. She has also learnt networking skills based around proving her competence to others and her natural wit. Her head in the cloud of abstract thought can mean that she fails to notice the obvious in the concrete real world, which frequently bores her. There we go. So SE. So now we're on FI. FI problems. So hopefully this from Wilma will put some sort of meat on the bones of FI. So FI, it's not ticking any of these boxes. It's unvalued, it's situational, and it's counter club. It does not tick valued, default, or club. It is the weakest function. Right. I'm going to put that there. If you want to pause that, take it in. If you want to take that in. Right. Again, this imaginative. Douglas Adams. Right. I've got an example. They on the South Bank show, 1992. You might find a YouTube video out there that says 2002. No, I don't think so. He died in 2001, May 11th. I remember. Big fan. So, thing is, so Melvin Bragg says to Douglas Adams, isn't Arthur a bit of a stereotype? And then effectively Douglas Adams, oh yes, of course. And he says, and then effectively he said, I'm not interested in the characters, I'm interested in the ideas. So there you go. Horse's mouth. ENTP. I'm not interested in the characters, I'm interested in the ideas. Now, obviously, you get ENTP is interested in typology, and they're going to be a bit more interested in psychology. So they may be atypical in that respect. And so the ENTP in typology is probably going to be less FI polar than those ENTPs who don't know anything about typology. Right, so, again, disdained. And you can see how far away it is from the lead function. In that, again, it's a counter club function. So it's over here on this side of counter club. It's not default because it's an introverting function within an extrovert. So it's down here for that reason. It's in that corner. Situational counter club functions, and it's unvalued. Right. Now, Some examples of Fi polar. So this is in Wilma. Right. I went to town on this. Right. What should I do? I'll remove myself. So, she is not the best judge of character. She believes a lot of people can perform the same action, but it doesn't reveal someone's true character. Motivation varies. So this is her perspective. She believes motivation is very hard to read because we often lack a full understanding of context. In other words, somebody can get punched for many and various reasons other than the puncher being a bad person. She is also not a very good judge of the status of a relationship. I etched out the judge and then forgot to write it. The judge of the status of it's hard for her to tell the difference between a friend and an acquaintance based on her feelings about somebody. She does not have finely grained feelings of connection. Due to doubt in this area, she appreciates people who are emotionally honest with her so that she is not expected to read between the lines nor mind read people. She is sometimes straightforward to the point of being blunt. She finds it hard to give moral support, partly because she requires it herself very rarely and relies on her Christian faith to give her moral support. On the same topic, she finds it hard to comfort others and show empathy. Though she can have intellectual empathy and psychological empathy based on her ability to read body language, if she is concentrating rather than being wrapped up in herself, which she frequently is. She is quite utilitarian in the sense of focusing on what works rather than going by established rules and traditions not mentioned in the Bible. Got that from Keirsey. She relies on her Christian faith quite a bit to guide her actions. She sometimes feels by accusations. Yeah, again, I should have then put hurt. She sometimes feels hurt by accusations of her being inconsiderate and uncaring, but remorse eats on her not for long. I think I got that from the Galenka profile. Remorse on her eats not for long, as she is too easy, and he got it from reality. Eats on her not for long, as she too easily distracted by the next shiny idea. Wilma trusts reason, but also her Christian faith. Again, that's specific to her, but again, it's like an FE thing. Wilma likes to keep her options open. It could be argued that she is only as loyal as her options. Again, Enneagram 7. So, there we go. Sit up straight. Pay attention. Right, so, we got here? We've got Peter Schiff and Ludwig von Mises. Now, Ludwig von Mises probably INTJ preferences, and then Peter Schiff, ENTP preferences. There you go, Wilma and Rena. So, that is it. Oh, wait a minute. There's a little bit more. I'm going to go back. There's a little bit more. There is... so the Dario Nardi stuff, if you want to pause that, take it, yeah. And then these are all of the model. Right, what I'm going to do, get rid of that baldy guy. There. All the model V's. All the model V's. Now then. Okay, that's all of those. Instinct. I suggest you pause this. I'm going to move on to the next one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's another one. Is it Piet? Chechi? Tree? Dwa? Udin? Right. Again, that's about why I'm calling it instincting rather than sensor. Oh, we done that one. We done that one. It must be late. We did that one. We have done that one. Past participle. If verb to be or verb to have is making it into the past participle. Right. Now it's the end. I obviously need to go to bed. Gramo. Oh no. That rhymes. As Gladys said in Heidi High. Book ended. I'm a poet and I didn't even know it.